Are there exceptions to the Constitution? Let's talk about that. What do you mean I can't say that? I have First Amendment rights. Oh, that's an exception? So I was scrolling through the interwebs as I do, and I came across an article regarding the Constitution. It's on a website called forwardprogressives.com. I just know they're about to defend my constitutional rights. And it is from it's from an attorney and freelance writer and activist. Ooh, this is going to be a good one. From New York City, named Ilyssa Fuchs. I don't swear on my channel, guys. That's obscene. Another exception to the First Amendment. Her name's Ilyssa Fuchs. Grow up, people. So, the name of the article is It's the Exception, Stupid. Why Shall Not Be Infringed is a Misnomer. Well, it's a good title because I already know a lot about what's coming. Right off the bat, she already calls everyone that disagrees with her stupid. So we know that this is going places. And then goes on to say that shall not be infringed is a misnomer. I'm sure that since this is a lawyer, that they're going to get into some legal definitions and terms and all that good stuff. I'm sure she knows that the legal definition of misnomer is a name that is wrong or not proper or appropriate. So, whenever something is named in a way that doesn't coincide with what it is. For instance, a king crab is not actually a crab. I never knew that. What misnomer does not represent is a false statement. Since shall not be infringed isn't a name, it's a statement, one can only assume that she just decided that calling it a misnomer, implying that people just don't understand what it means, probably comes off a little bit better than saying a pivotal point in one of our amendments is a false statement. The first sentence states, for many non-lawyers, the idea that the Constitution is not only fallible, but riddled with exceptions, may sometimes come as a surprise, if not a shock. For some lawyers, the idea that the Constitution was written in such a way that citizens could understand their rights without legal counsel or a law degree may come as a surprise, if not a shock. Now, we're not talking about some obscure law that's on Article 523B in some obscure law that we have lawyers flipping through pages trying to find the exact wording of it so that they can nail a criminal. We're talking about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. In the very first sentence, she puts the idea in your head that if you're not a lawyer, then your God-given rights are something that need to be explained to you by somebody who has a degree in such expertise. She goes on to say, nevertheless, truth be told, the Constitution is actually brimming with exceptions, and in some cases, so much so that they outweigh the rules. So she's saying that sometimes within the Constitution, there are so many exceptions that the Constitution itself is the exception. That sometimes your fundamental rights are the exception to the rule. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article to you. You can go read it for yourself. I'll put the link in the description below, and you can go to the article, leave a comment, maybe follow her on Twitter, let her know what you think. But what it goes on to say in general is it shows all these exceptions, legal exceptions to the Constitution, and gives Supreme Court cases that kind of outline what those exceptions are. So the whole bulk of the article is showing some of the exceptions to our amendments as ruled by the Supreme Court. And this is to prove her original statement that the Constitution is fallible. The Supreme Court has said so. So in order for us to just blanket statement believe that the Constitution is fallible because the Supreme Court says so, we would then have to believe that the Supreme Court is then infallible. However, the Supreme Court has never made a ruling that the shall not be infringed part of the Second Amendment is a misnomer or a false statement, shouldn't be there, doesn't apply. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court couldn't do that. In order to edit an amendment or make a new amendment, we would have to ratify that as the United States. The Supreme Court can't just go in and say that that is no longer valid. But her whole argument holds no water unless there are exceptions to our constitutional amendments. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, when we're talking about freedom of speech, we're not just saying you have the right to actually open your mouth and speak. We're talking about your freedom to convey ideas, to share what you think. So I found a webpage called United States Free Speech Exceptions on Wikipedia. Can we please be adult about this and not use the whole Wikipedia loophole? Wikipedia is not a valid source. Anybody could write that. We all know it's pretty accurate. First of all, I think we all understand that in order for us to claim that we ourselves have constitutional rights, we have to then admit and understand that everyone else around us has constitutional rights also. So if we try to do something that infringes on their rights, we cannot claim that it is our right to do so, which is pretty much the premise for every exception to the Constitution. So right here in the table of contents, without diving too deep into it, the first exception to the free speech is communicative impact restrictions and incitement. So what this means is you cannot use this freedom of speech to tell people to do something illegal. You can't incite someone to go commit a crime. I can't look over to this guy and say, hey, shoot that person. That's illegal. Obviously, that's illegal. It's not me trying to share an idea. It's not me being suppressed and telling you what I think. It's me not being able to take the right of a person away. The second one is false statement of fact. So you're not protected in lying. So you can't commit libel or slander. You can't say you're a local business owner and you start talking crap about the guy that's running the shop across the street. The third one on here is obscenity. And it seems that obscenity really applies more to like in public, things that people would consider a shameful or morbid interest in sex. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have things in private possession, but this seems to be some kind of exception to the First Amendment. I'm not sure if like running through a grocery store and screaming obscene language like falls under this or not, but it might. I don't know. I'm not the lawyer. So the fourth exception is child pornography, and this is something different than obscenity. It's not just because it's obscene. Obscene things, oftentimes you're protected within the privacy of your home, but this takes it up to a whole nother level. It's just not obscene, but it's also infringing on the rights of the children. They are not of the legal age of maturity, so they cannot make decisions for themselves. They cannot consent to these acts. Committing sexual acts with a child or forcing them to commit sexual acts is statutory rape. It's considered raping them and forcing them to do something because they cannot legally consent to it. So possessing these materials is creating a market for it. It's creating a reason for the producers of these to continue to do it and putting more children in harm's way. Plus, it's extremely obscene and morbid. Number 5 is fighting words and offensive speech. So fighting words would be considered like if you get up in somebody's face and you say something that any reasonable person would then want to act upon in a violent way. This doesn't mean that hate speech is unprotected. Usually this means that it's a one-on-one confrontation. Number 6 is speech owned by others. So you're not within your First Amendment rights to plagiarize somebody else's material like Good Mythical Morning. You can't go and write down word for word a book and then sell it to somebody. You're not protected in that because it's not because they're suppressing your ideas or your thoughts. They're keeping you from stealing somebody else's thoughts, their intellectual property. Number 7 is commercial speech, and this goes on to say that it's talking about like false advertising and misleading advertising. If you were to try to sell a diet pill that's supposedly supposed to help you lose all this weight, and it really doesn't do anything, that's misleading and false advertising. That's not protected under First Amendment speech because, like I said, that's not suppressing your rights or your opinions or your right to share things. It's protecting the rights of somebody else. Number 8 is restrictions based on special capacity of government, and there's a lot of different specific capacities of government that it goes into. I'm not going to go into all those, but just from first-hand experience, as a member of the United States military, I am not allowed to, like, say, endorse a candidate while in uniform, because what I'm doing then is I'm not sharing my own ideas, but I'm presenting them to you as if this is the idea of the military. If I were to like go in uniform and represent Donald Trump at one of his political rallies, then it would appear as if Donald Trump has the support of the military, and the government prohibits that. You're not allowed to falsely convey your ideas as the ideas of the government. Earlier, I pointed out that to use the Supreme Court as proof against an infallible constitution would then mean that the Supreme Court is infallible, and I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's true at all. I don't think that I even really agree with all of these exceptions to freedom of speech, but I'm by no means a lawyer like Ilyssa Fuchs. She then goes on to list some Supreme Court rulings that provide exceptions to the Fourth Amendment, which is, of course, your protection against illegal search and seizure, which says that shall not be violated and no warrant issued without probable cause. We all know that the government's opinion on the Fourth Amendment is pretty infallible. The Founding Fathers couldn't have possibly considered that one day someone might try to smuggle fruit across state lines. And her whole point wraps up with, getting back to the Second Amendment, if it isn't already clear, despite the fact that it says shall not be infringed, just like the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law, and the Fourth Amendment says shall not be violated, it can in reality be infringed. No, the reality is that you have no respect of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. There's a reason they use such strong language as in shall not be infringed, or Congress shall make no law, or shall not be violated. They chose their words very specifically. When the Constitution was drafted and submitted for ratification, a group called the Anti-Federalists were really worried about the federal government overstepping their boundaries and taking too much power. And they urged strongly that Madison add a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. And he didn't want to at first. He thought that it was unnecessary because the government didn't have the power to take those rights away anyway. He thought it was pointless to put in writing that the government doesn't have the power to take away these rights whenever the government didn't have that power anyway. He also thought that having a concise list of rights would then cause people to think that that rights beyond this list were not guaranteed. And that was kind of a dangerous thing. He didn't want to imply that those other rights were not also rights. And then lastly, the states already had bills of rights in each state pretty much, so he thought that it was kind of unnecessary. Finally, he did add a Bill of Rights to the Constitution, and they're known as the first 10 Amendments. And the whole idea of using those strong terms like shall not be infringed and shall not be violated, it was to be emphatic about them. Ilyssa Fuchs makes it sound like the Constitution that says the government cannot infringe these can be infringed because the government says so. This Constitution is something that supersedes the government. These are God-given rights that the Constitution doesn't provide us, it just lists them, rights that we already have. So the government can't take away our rights unless it's according to the exceptions that were outlined by the government. So if you want to, head over to the link that I provide in the description and get down there in the comment section and let them know what you think. While you're there, be sure to say hi to John Cross. He replies to nearly everyone's comment that disagrees with Ilyssa Fuchs and follows her example by calling them stupid, or moron, or retard. Threw that one in there. I love how tolerant these four progressives are. Anyways, guys, that's all we have for this video, so give me a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Let me know in the comment section, do you think that the government oversteps their boundaries a little bit with some of these exceptions? Also, do you think that we need a lawyer to explain to us what our basic God-given rights are? Also, make sure you let me know if there's anything you want me to cover, any news stories, or anything you just want to know what my opinion is. And I will see you in the next video. I gotta get a better outro. Everybody says, see you in the next video.